you're not part of the new independent stuff, like Steven Anderson
I think
group.
that's total heresy.
Woo! Good. I'm like, wait a minute, we're gonna have to end this real quick.
Maybe we can play that in the beginning. That's total heresy. That'll get some people.
Welcome to the Bad Fruit Podcast. I am your host, Jonathan, and today I am joined by the Baptist Blue Jay, one of the many strange and wonderful creatures that inhabit the Theological Zoo on Facebook. As his name suggests, he is a Baptist. More specifically, he comes from the more independent fundamentalist Baptist world. He prefers the King James, and he is unapologetically a dispensationalist, as you will hear. In other words, he's not a Lutheran. We probably, on paper, would seem like we don't have very much in common. And yet, during this conversation, we do find a lot that we can agree on. We talk about modern evangelicalism and the entertainment-driven churches and questionable worship music, and the need for serious Bible teaching. So we are in agreement, actually, on quite a bit. However, there are some things that we definitely do not agree on. Now, this is not a formal debate. Instead, this is a conversation between two Christians from very different traditions who can find common ground and have a very civil conversation. Now, we don't get into the sacraments versus ordinances. I've talked a lot about that on the podcast, and he and I may talk about this sometime in the future. We're both on Facebook and have conversations with each other. But what we do disagree with, and this is more of the latter half of the episode, is on the King James Bible. Now, to be clear, he's not a King James only. He is a King James preferred, which I can respect. And he is a dispensationalist, and I am not. My eschatology is amillennialism, not premillennial dispensationalism. Now, I think that we actually have a really great conversation, and so I hope that you'll stick around to hear it all. One of the reasons that we did this is that the Baptist Blue Jay is launching his own podcast. In fact, the first episode is already out, and I'll post a link to that on our Facebook page. And so I wanted to have him on so he could share a little bit about himself, and you could get to know him a little bit and see if his podcast was something you'd be interested in listening to. Again, I don't agree with many of the views that he holds, and yet there is common ground there. He is my brother in Christ. He is a Christian. So I hope that you'll enjoy the conversation with the Baptist Blue Jay. Well, thank you so much, Baptist Blue Jay, for joining me today. How are you doing today?
So far, so good. Just a normal day at fast food.
Right. So you are the Baptist Blue Jay. You are one of the pages in the really fun Theological Zoo. What caused you to choose that name? Where did the Baptist Blue Jay come from?
Well, you know what's funny, actually? My biggest fans know that I was the fundamentalist flying squirrel before I was the Baptist Blue Jay. And a lot of people...
Oh, so this is a second one for you. I didn't know that.
That's right. A lot of people assume that the flying squirrel got zucked. He did not. And he wasn't that hard of a fundamentalist. He didn't get sucked. But for him, I had decided I wanted to do Baptist Blue Jay. I kind of want Baptist in the name. I really like Blue Jays. I wanted something I could see in nature, and you can't really see flying squirrels in nature. They come out at night when everyone's asleep, and I'm like, Now I kind of go out, and I love looking at like nature and birds and things like that. So I look and I see blue jays and bluebirds, and I'm like, oh, that reminds me of my page.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Well, I've always enjoyed blue jays. I think they're one of the cool birds out there. So I like the name. It's a good name, Baptist Blue Jay. I like being part of the zoo. The zoo's really fun, and there's a lot of cool pages out there. Young Earth creationist octopus. I always give
He deserves a shout out.
him a shout out. I always give him a shout out. He's great. But we've had a lot of the zoo on the podcast. We've had Blessed Bald Eagle, Lutheran lion, charismatic cheetah, young Earth creation octopus, and a few others. So, but yeah. Anyways, I'm happy to be talking with the Baptist Blue Jay today, and so welcome.
It's good to be here.
Now, so you had mentioned that. Well, let's back up. So what was your goal? What's kind of the goal of the Baptist Blue Jay Facebook page? What are you just there to make some memes, make people laugh? What is you're Baptist? Obviously, are you Southern Baptist? Are you Free Will Baptist? Are you one of those other weird Baptists? There's a lot of different types of Baptists. You could just throw Baptist in front of anything, it seems like, in some groups. So,
Well, for me, I know that anyone that watches my page enough knows that I'm not a free will Baptist. Um, I stand pretty strong for eternal security. Um, yeah, I mean, I fully believe that. So I'm more on that line. Um, I agree with a lot of what the Southern Baptists say. I think they're a little bit too loose for me. Um, in a
okay.
lot of ways, and that's why I like the fact of being independent. I think independent is better in that sense that you don't have to associate with everything that everybody else is doing, and there's some benefits to either way, really. But for me, I like the fact of, oh, okay, this is independent Baptist. Um, uh, my parents, when they got saved and they first started going to church together, that's where they went. They went to an independent Baptist church, and I've gone sporadically. I've gone to, when I was really young, I went to one. I wanted to say this, a shout out to Open Brethren Beaver, because I actually did go to a Brethren church for 3 years.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
didn't learn a whole lot,
That's a good
but
page
I
too.
went, you know,
Yeah.
and that's not any fault of theirs. I was a kid. Yeah. So
Sure.
I went there for about 3 years. Grew up evangelical. So for many years, I was going to an evangelical church, and they were kind of going the purpose-driven life way, and I didn't know a whole lot about that. But then I had to know what doctrine was. I had to know what does the Bible really say. No gimmicks, no anything like that. And so for me, my first actual oh, okay, this is doctrine, was through CARM. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard of CARM, but it's Creation Apologetics Research Ministry. And it's through a man named Matt Slick. And I said, I don't agree with everything that he says, but at least he puts an importance on it. And they put out articles nowadays too and stuff. And I've called in a few times actually, and just asking him certain things. It's almost like the new Bible answer, man. And so I
Yeah.
did that for a little while, and then I went to an independent Baptist college. Before that, I was at an evangelical one called Word of Life Bible Institute. And to be honest with you, it was the same thing. I didn't know. I said, oh, okay. I have like 10, 15 minutes of preaching, and then the rest is just all songs. I'm like, oh, it's all literally just people jumping up and down. They had to put a stop to it, but they actually had crowd surfing once. Uh, you know,
Okay. Sounds like my local
yeah,
megachurch.
it's like, oh, someone's gonna get hurt here. And that guy was having fun, but they put a stop to that.
Did you guys have a male stripper? Because we had that at our local megachurch.
Yikes. Okay, so you got more problems than we do.
Yeah. I don't go to that church, but yeah. But yeah, anyways. So, crowd surfing, yeah, probably not safe.
Right. So I'm saying to myself, I'm like, oh, okay. I know the doctrine of I studied under a man who had passed away a little while ago named Dr. Jimmy DeYoung. Um, if you
Okay.
know if you know why I put up so much stuff on dispensationalism on the page, a lot of it actually comes from him. Um, he was a great preacher, but you couldn't sit in the front row, uh, unless you wanted to shower. You know, he's a great man of God. He just, that was a problem he had. Uh, but yeah, he lived in Israel, and he actually passed away. He said, "Oh, I know the Lord is going to come during my lifetime." And of course, no one can really say that. No one really knows the time, but he was pretty certain on it. And then he passed away a few years ago. But he was a big influence on my life. So, just a disclaimer out there. when Baptist Blue Jay throws out stuff about dispensationalism, it has nothing to do with John Hagee.
Okay.
Yes, he's a false teacher. I know that. And I know that,
That's good.
and John Hagee, he said a lot of stuff. If you don't vote, for Trump, if you don't vote for him, you're not saved. And, he's also said that, under dispensationalism, Jewish people are already all set. And I think that comes from a false view of
Yeah.
dispensationalism. And so I'm like, and it's unfortunate because you got those guys out there that really do make us look bad, but I never learned under those people. So for me, I'm looking at all these other guys saying, oh, okay, Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, I knew about Charles Ryrie. I hadn't looked into his work until a little while ago. So I like Ryrie quite a bit. Ron Rhodes, different people out there. Kind of the golden age of Dallas Theological Seminary,
Okay. Yeah.
So I wanted to do all of that. And I said, I have all this research. I was going to be a pastor, and that never happened. I tried 2 or 3 times. And every time it seemed like there was just a roadblock or something. So for me, the Baptist Blue Jay page, I'm like, hey, this is a way of, I'm studying all this stuff. This is a way for me to get the truth out. Oh, great. Sometimes the Baptist Blue Jay page is kind of like, I'll write something and I'll be like, oh, okay, this is kind of strict doctrine. It's not funny. I wish it was. Sometimes my posts are funny, but I think Baptist Blue Jay, kind of leans more towards the serious side sometimes. That's why the Blue Jay's there. He lightens the mood,
There you go.
Yes.
Well, you also have a few SpongeBob memes, so it's okay. There's a little bit of fun
Okay,
there.
so Baptist Bluebird does not like SpongeBob. And sometimes that's why I post them.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it helps the marriage out quite a bit. Just post SpongeBob memes.
That's your wife?
Baptist Bluebird is, yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So you're both Bluebird Baptist pages together.
Yeah, she was actually going to get rid of her page. And when I joined the zoo, I said, hey, this is pretty fun. And, I didn't tell her about all the arguing or anything like that. I just said, oh, no, this is fun. We'll be animals together. That's cute. And, let's start something up. Oh, okay. And through that, she's writing her book now. And she's almost done that. And so we'll see what happens. Funny fact, me and her actually went to Word of Life Bible Institute, but it wasn't at the same time. So she went a year after I did. And it took about 10 years for us to finally meet after the fact. Yep, and our moms went to the same college, Lancaster Bible in Pennsylvania. So I'm like, we got a lot of near misses here. But I always think there's really no coincidental things with God, and God had us meet at the time He wanted to. So yeah, she's kind of doing that, and she has her page. She has sometimes she'll struggle writing memes or something like that. She'll get ideas every now and then, but I'm the guy who's literally just sitting at his phone, too much screen time, trying to figure out what do I write. I see Batman slapping Robin, just throw on some words.
There
Yes.
you go. No, you've got some funny ones out there. So there was one, I don't know what show it is, but it's the the squirrel and the blue jay or whatever, and the squirrel says vegan, and then he's holding a box, Baptist church, and then the blue jay punches him through it. It's his potluck.
I got one guy laughing. I don't know if he's a follower or not, but he should be. But he's
That's
like,
funny,
man, this is hilarious. And, you get one comment of a guy who laughed, and I'm like, oh, okay. I see 100 people saw it, but one guy laughed. Yeah, that's fine with me, though.
There you go. One's worth
That's
it.
right,
So.
yep.
No, and I think it's good because that's one thing I've noticed about the zoo, the Theological Zoo. And for those who don't know what we're talking about, there's a bunch of pages out there with animal named So there's I think the first one was Presbyterian Panda, right? And then we have Charismatic Cheetah
Yeah.
and obviously Baptist Blue Jay and all these other ones. And Blessed Bald Eagle's been on a couple times. And so we have there's just this group, and it's not organized. It's just people of different traditions get together, and we sometimes call it the Ecumenical Zoo because even though we're all from different traditions, we tend to try to get along with each other. We'll have debates, obviously. You and I I think, have had a couple little comment back and forth, but overall, we try to be charitable to each other, realizing we're still all brothers and sisters in Christ. And so yeah, I mean, it's really fun because a lot of the pages are very passionate about what they believe in, and I think that's good. I mean, I'm a Lutheran, obviously. I'm gonna share what I believe, right? And you're a Baptist, you're gonna share what you believe. And so, being passionate, following Christ in the way that you understand it. What's cool though is a lot of it is there's a lightheartedness to it with the memes, with the funny things, and some pages are a little more serious than others. I try to balance it a little bit. I think you probably balance it pretty decent, but I know you got some stuff on there too that's a little more serious. But overall, I think it's a pretty cool thing, and so the once you start following, once you start discovering this from the outside, then all of a sudden you notice just how many are in the zoo, and it's like then it becomes a can you find them all? Can you follow them all? Um, I believe it was Orthodox Orangutan put together a website with all the links to all the different pages a while back.
Yes.
I don't know if it's been updated, so I don't know if everybody's on there, but last I checked, it looked like everybody was on there, and so that was pretty cool. So it's kind of one of those things where it's kind of funny. It's our own little meme world, and there's a lot of inside jokes, but it's not too hard to come in from the outside and just follow along. And you can also just follow the ones that you agree with or find interesting. Not all of my listeners are Lutheran. In fact, we have a lot of listeners from all kinds of different traditions. I've been doing a series on the denominations
Really?
here at the podcast. And so I started this last year, and whenever I have the opportunity and have spent some time researching them and write the script and everything, then I will record it. And so I started with Roman Catholicism, we did Eastern Orthodox, did the Reformation, did Lutherans, Calvinist, Reformed, Anglicans. But what I've tried to do with each of those episodes is to be charitable to the denomination that I'm talking about, because I don't want to do a caricature of them. Obviously, I have disagreements with all the different groups that I'm covering. Otherwise, I would be those groups, right? I'm not them. I'm a Lutheran. So, but at the same time, what I've tried to do is just make them a little educational, kind of fun, and just share what they believe, the different varieties of them. And once you start to look at it, it's like there's a few different types of Calvinists. There's a few different types of Baptists and different things. And I just spent a few episodes on the Pentecostals, and that's a Wild West area.
Uh-oh.
There's a wide range of Pentecostals, right? There's all the way from some very conservative ones that have pretty orthodox theology, all the way to complete heretics who deny the Trinity. So
Yes.
it's like Pentecostalism is a very wide spread of things. So yeah, I try to be academical when I'm hanging out and talking with other people, and so I follow a lot of the different denomination pages from the zoo. And so I think that's what's kind of cool about it, is I think we all try to do that, and then obviously stand up and promote the things that we actually do believe. I'm not a dispensationalist, I'm not a Baptist, but I also agree with some of the things you post. I'm like, I may not agree with everything that this guy believes in, but I can agree with that, or that's actually funny. Like the one about King James and the Message Bible, right? It's like that's funny.
Yeah, so I put them both.
So
I know the message is really extreme. So I'm like, oh, okay.
yeah.
If I put one of the other ones in, usually I'll get more like, hey, wait a minute, I read the ESV or something like
Yeah.
that. So I'm like, well, if I put the message in, I don't think that's going to get as much controversy. Hopefully
No.
everyone's on the same
No, the
page
Message
here.
is not a Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, no, the Message and the Passion Translation are not are not good translations. Passion is really bad. Honestly, Passion's like super bad. But the Message is basically just as bad. But I think it was the Passion. I think it was the Passion, yeah, where he like claimed to be taken to heaven and seen like hidden books that were in heaven, and then he came back down and wrote his translation of it afterwards, and it's like that's weird. So you had also mentioned or made a post about potentially doing a
Yeah.
podcast. So what's that about? What are you planning on doing with that?
Okay, so for me, I actually initially wanted to do a podcast. It's funny how the Zoo page came to be. I saw people like um, the American Protestant Alligator, who is no longer the American Protestant Alligator, Christian Caveman.
Is he's caveman.
That's
That's
right.
right. Yeah, he's caveman
Yes.
now.
So I saw people like that, and I said, "Oh, okay. So I can jump on board here." And I'm not sure exactly like with podcasting. I'm still kind of trying to learn it. So
Hmm.
um, let me see how easy it is to do memes first. Kind of, I don't know if you want to say build a brand or just kind of get my name out there in some way that just like, oh, hey, this is what I believe, initially. And so that's kind of the reason the Baptist Blue Jay came to be. I said, hey, how can I get not my name out there? I kind of like the fact that my name isn't out there because then, I want to focus more on Christ and less on me. But
Sure.
but how can I get a platform and then I can go and do the like either Spotify or Podbean, and then from there I can kind of flesh it out more. Like sometimes you'll see a
Hmm.
meme and you'll go, "Oh, okay, yeah, he really likes King James, but why does he like the King James version?" And then I can kind of go into that. Like I can have like a podcast for half an hour to say, "Hey, this is why I like King James. This is why I put on my channel King James Preferred." Now, most people think I'm arguing from an only position. Um, which isn't necessarily the case. I have a bunch of, and my page initially was not gonna start out battling about like eschatology, the end times, even though I know a lot about that.
Hmm.
I wanted to put out creation stuff. I love
Oh, okay.
creation ministries. I was discipled by a man in Bible college when I was in North Dakota, and he would just give me answers in Genesis books, and I would just read
Hmm.
through them. I still have two or three of like the big thick books of them. I've
Yeah.
seen the ICR conferences. I've done, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna put out memes on this, and then they don't trend at all. I'm like, huh? Oh, yeah, 10, 20 people, something like that. Then I put up stuff on the end times. I'm like, oh, this is kind of a hot topic here. Oh, now I got like 150, and not everyone's happy. Uh, all right then.
Disaster sales.
Unfortunately, yes. Yes, I think Facebook likes
Yeah.
that, So, even though I will be doing a lot of creation stuff on my podcast, I'll kind of try to balance it out a little bit. But that's what I love to study. I love Ray Comfort. I love his books. Myth of the Modern Message changed the way I thought of preaching. So, a
Hmm.
lot of IFB, and I like a lot of what IFB does, and I love the fact that they put a focus on I think that is the right translation. One thing I wish they would do a little bit better, though, is I love verse by verse preaching, expository.
Hmm.
And I'm grateful that men like Paul Chappell have stood up and said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go verse by verse through books. And I find you learn more that way. Topical preaching is a bit more, it's fine sometimes, if the time calls for it. But I find it to be a bit more sporadic. So even though I disagree with like John MacArthur and a few of those other guys, I really like the style of preaching they have. I find I
Gotcha.
learn a
Yeah.
lot more that way than like, oh, okay, I'm learning about forgiveness today, which is fine. We all need
Hmm.
to forgive, but I need more substance than that. And Ray Comfort's book changed my mind on that. The Myth of the Modern Message. I said, this is excellent because it's his example was just like the medicine you take. Um, you water down the medicine by putting water in it so that it doesn't have the bitter taste anymore. But the problem is it doesn't affect you like if you had just taken the medicine itself. You put too much water in it, the medicine doesn't affect you the same way it would anymore. And so that's what we've done in modern evangelicalism. We've watered everything down so much that we're taking all this stuff, and there are some people that are getting saved through these methods, but the end doesn't justify the means. And the problem is now we have a whole host of, like, I have a mega church in my area of 1,600 people, and I'll ask them sometimes, I'll go, why do you go to this church? Oh, I love to be entertained. Oh, that's
Yeah.
not good. And see, that's what I left. I left the modern evangelical movement that waters everything down, music for an hour, 10-minute preaching, and I said, let's get back to what the gospel means. Let's have no distractions on that. So that's why I greatly respect what the IFB do, and my podcast is going to have all of that in it, basically. And it's gonna have some IFB stuff. Like I like what Paul Chappell does. I like there's a ministry out in Florida called Strength for Life, and I don't know if people have noticed, but on my Blue Jay page, I posted a lot from them, Strength for Life,
Okay.
and I'll just listen to them, like, you know.
No, that's cool. I think what's interesting is you and I would probably agree on modern evangelicalism. That's probably a big area where you and I would have probably almost complete agreement, because it's all about entertainment now. It's I jokingly said, did you have a male stripper? So we have one of the largest mega churches in the United States here in our town. It's really close to us. And when we started this podcast, my brother and I, 2 years ago, that was our main focus. We talked about James River. They literally had a sword swallower. He wasn't a male stripper necessarily while he was at the church, but he used to be a male stripper, and now he's a sword swallower pole climber. And so he climbs a pole, he swallows a sword, and he slides down this pole. This is at a men's conference. Mark Driscoll was there, and it was a big disaster. We've talked a lot about it on the podcast, and you can find stuff on it because it got national coverage. And it's just like, it was a circus. And it's like, okay, fine. You could be like, well, this was a men's conference, not a church service, so it's like a little different. The year before that, they had literally a tank with a guy with like Uzis shooting, and they've had, MMA fights, all this stuff at their men's conferences, right? And it's a big show, and it's fine to have fun. Like, I'm not saying
Right.
I'm not like a killjoy here and saying like you can't have monster trucks and tanks, and like, sure, that stuff's fun, but it has its time and place, right? Like, I'll go to a monster truck rally to watch that. There's, if I want to, see MMA fight, I'll just go watch an MMA fight. I don't really want to see a guy rip his shirt off, swallow a sword, and climb a pole. Like, that's just not really my thing.
I'm all set there.
But you can watch that stuff on like America's Got Talent. And so like modern evangelicalism, especially in that sort of mega church world, it's just so shallow. And then at their actual church services, they've had people like Todd White and Bill Johnson there. And, these guys are heretics or borderline heretics when you actually look at what they teach. And I'm not just saying that because I don't like what they're teaching. Like, they actually deny, like Bill Johnson denies the two natures of Christ. That's heresy. Todd White believes in becoming sinless. That's not true. If you say you have no sin, you deceive yourself, and the truth is not in you, right? We don't ever become sinless. We are always saint and sinner. Now, that doesn't mean we're not unsaved or anything when we're struggling with sins. It just means like we're not going to become perfect. We're not going to live this, perfect life after we become Christians and never sin again. No, we will still. And so Todd White teaches that like you'll eventually ascend to this, state of perfection. There's other things he does, like lie about lengthening people's legs and all those other things. But anyways, all that to say is that the modern megachurch world it's a feel good message, it's entertainment, it's like you said, it's all it's all songs, and they're very repetitive. The theology of the songs are very shallow. I'm not super picky about, like, if a church wants to do modern worship, I'm fine with that. It's just a song style. Old fashioned hymns once were new too. So like it's okay to like have new stuff, but for me, I care about what is being sung, right? And so like the lyrics
That's right.
matter more to me than the style of the music. And thankfully, a lot of the old hymns are just really solid. You
That's
know,
right.
you don't have to worry about the theology. That's why we keep singing them, 100, 200, 300, 400 years later, 500 years in some cases, because the theology stands up. Martin Luther wrote, A Mighty Fortress, right?
Yes.
Like everybody sings that song. It's a great one. And that holds up. When you're doing just shallow worship music, it's very repetitive. The theology isn't very good, or it's just, Jesus my boyfriend type
True.
stuff. And then you get to the sermon, and the sermon's just a TED talk essentially of
Yeah.
hey, so I watched a movie last week and I thought it was really good, and there's like a life lesson here that I was thinking about as I read this passage of the Bible. It's like, that's not a sermon. It's just you reviewing a movie. So I think we would probably agree on all of that. And I think, there's multiple ways that people respond to that, because unfortunately, I think it sends a lot of people away from the church, because when people sort of wake up, like one day they're just like, I feel like just nothing's happening here. Like, what is going on? Why are we still going to this church? What are they doing here? Or there's a scandal or something.
Yes.
And I feel like it can lead people away from the church, because they're just like, if it's just this, then what's the point? And that's kind of where I was for a while. I grew up Southern Baptist, and then kind of dabbled in the Pentecostal, non-denominational, evangelical world for a while. And at one point, it was just kind of like, what are we doing? Like, what is actually happening here? Because like none of this seems to be of any importance whatsoever. And so I kind of went back to my Southern Baptist roots, and we were there for a while. I spent some time as a Calvinist. And so like I was kind of on that trajectory. And then there was just a few things that were still bugging me. And I was studying church history and different denominations. And we decided to try out some other stuff. And we've been Lutheran now for quite a while. Or for a while now. So that's where I landed. Sounds like you being in that world kind of brought you back into the Baptist world a little bit, which is great. That's a lot better than the modern evangelical world.
Oh, right. There is a lot of problems there. I mean, I kind of looked at like, oh, okay, so I still believe a lot of the doctrine of like the Baptist church. It's just not being taught anymore, and that's the problem. So I feel bad for all these churches that, and I see why people can get upset and they can fight because they see their church turning, and we can see the results of what it can eventually become. The summer at the movies where you're preaching on Toy Story and the Avengers, and I've seen all those movies
Yeah.
before. They're fine movies. I don't really need a sermon on them. And then you
Right.
cross a line when you put like Iron Man on the cross, and I'm like, boy, that's just that turns my stomach a little bit. But yeah, then I do notice too. One of the things that I've done, and because I like Spencer Smith a lot, I appreciate his teaching. I like when we talk about music, right? I say that the source is important, because if the source isn't important, then a guy like Joel Osteen can come along and he can just start writing stuff, and then the church says, well, the lyrics are still good, but it's Joel Osteen that put it out. And I would have a
Yeah.
problem with that. So when I look at the source, I go,
Me
oh,
too. Yeah.
okay. Fanny Crosby, yeah, I've looked into her before. She was an independent fundamental Baptist. As far as I could tell, I don't think she ever was. But she was a conservative Protestant woman who I found agreement with, and I said, okay, no, she's not Bethel, Hillsong, or anything like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
you look into, and a lot of the hymn writers, Baptist Banter's been putting it up, and so I kind of share off of him. for his song series. And a lot of these men were faithful believers in God that wrote these songs. Um,
Oh
and I
yeah.
just wish we would get back to that. I don't mind if people are. Some people say, there was a follower I had, boy, Baptist Blue Jay, you really take a hard stand on music. Yes, in some ways I do, but I am not the kind of guy either that says, oh, okay, if this is a Getty song, sorry guys, I'm going to have to walk out of here. I think this is, it's not heresy or anything. I think the Gettys are fine. I think that Sovereign Grace music, I think the Sovereign Grace music is okay, but I think they lean more towards sometimes the 7-Eleven stuff. So then, like, we're singing, you've heard the song Behold Our God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that song. It'll probably be
Yeah.
a Christian classic someday. But when we sing You Will
Sure.
Reign Forever too many times, I just kind of check out a little bit. Uh,
Yeah.
and so Sovereign Grace does tend to sometimes lean towards that 7-Eleven stuff, and I'd stay away from that. Um, so I would be a bit stricter on the music. I don't know how the Lutheran Church does it, but I would say you guys are probably more traditional.
Absolutely. So we have a lot of churches will sometimes have two services like our church does. So we have our early service has hymns, and then our second service will have more modern music. But what we do at our church, I like, is we have a very strict liturgy and we follow that. The only thing that we swap for our second service is the style of the music. So it's just more modern style music second service, and then it's organ music the first service. But yeah, we're very intentional about the songs that we're singing. Some Lutheran churches are better at that than others. Some Lutheran churches are only hymns. Some do a little bit of a mix of hymns and modern. But overall, we're very conservative. I'm LCMS Lutheran, so not the ELCA.
Uh-oh.
We're one of the good Lutheran churches out there. We're very conservative with our theology, and so when we do sing a song, and that's kind of what I was saying is like, I don't necessarily care if you really like a modern style of music. Let's just make sure that the lyrics are really good. But I like what you said because it's something that I've been kind of talking about recently. We did a couple episodes on music and the songs that we sing at church, and that is the source is really important
Yes.
because um if you sing a Bethel song, even if it's a good Bethel song, like that might be oxymoron, but like just roll with me for a second. Even if the lyrics themselves are not bad, right? Like maybe the lyrics are okay, or it's like an older Bethel song, and it's like, oh, I don't know, I don't really see anything in here that I actually disagree with. Okay, let's pump the brakes here though, because if you sing it, you're actually financially supporting Bethel, and you're kind of casually endorsing them a little bit because you're saying if you really like this song, you can listen to this song in your car later. And then when you're listening to it in your car later, you're listening to Bethel. And then you're like, oh, I really like all of Bethel's other songs. And some of those aren't very good. Or you might be like, I might look up this church later. And it's like, oh, this guy, Bill Johnson, let's see what he has to say. And so like hopefully that won't happen. But it's one of those things where it's like, I just think that we should be careful about an intentional, like you were saying, about the source of those songs. And so it's for me, again, it's like it has nothing to do with the style. It's all about where did it come from and what are we actually saying? Because like an old hymn, one of my favorites is What Wondrous Love Is This?
Yes.
And it says, what wondrous love is this that caused the Lord of bliss to bear the dreadful curse for my soul? Like, man, you hear that and you're just like, oh my gosh. And then another line says, when I was sinking down beneath God's righteous frown, Christ laid aside his crown for my soul. It's just it hits, and it's like it's good theology, and as you're singing it, it's like it's teaching you this truth of the gospel, that it's Christ who laid aside his crown to die for sinners.
Right.
God is the one who bore the curse for our souls. Like, this is God who does this for us. And so, yeah, it's like then you sing these modern songs. And it's like, Jesus is my boyfriend. It's
I
like,
sang about
what?
oceans the other day. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like Oceans is, I'm not gonna lie, it's a catchy song. It's like, if you listen to it, it gets stuck in your head, and it's
Oh, yeah.
catchy, and like the people who wrote it knew what they were doing. But man, like, what are we even talking about here? Like, there's no substance to it. It's all vague. It's very like interpretative. I wouldn't, I wouldn't even necessarily say it's heresy. It's just, what are we what are we actually confessing and saying here?
That's right.
I just don't know. I don't know what Oceans is actually about. Like, we're walking on the wall. I don't know. If you know what it's about, let me know.
Yep. No, can't tell you that. And if anyone's listening to this and they're like, "Ooh, maybe I'll get Baptist Blue Jay in the car and I'll turn on some music for Bethel." No, I'm getting out of the car. I'll walk. That's
So
fine.
fastest way to get you out of a car on a road trip is to start playing.
You start playing Bethel, Hillsong, Elevation. The main three bad guys. I'll just okay. See you guys later.
Yeah, you're like, I'm gonna walk.
It's not where my convictions are. Oh, dear.
There you go. So,
but thankfully.
So it sounds like. Oh, go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, I was going to say, thankfully, Baptist Bluebird, right? So I was telling her a lot of this, and she was going to an American Baptist church when we were dating, and I had dated some girls before that were like charismatic, and like some of the ones that were like, oh yeah, at my church, people walk on all fours, they bark, and I'm like, wait, what? They bark like dogs? Okay. I'm out of here. And so, some of those girls obviously didn't work out for that reason. So I meet Baptist Bluebird,
Sure.
and I get a little nervous because I say, oh, okay, she's going to an American Baptist church now. And if you know American Baptists, they're not exactly, we all got one group for denominations that we really wish weren't there. Okay, so sorry if anybody's listening to this and they are American Baptists. I'm sorry about that, but that's the group I wish weren't there because of the women pastors. Because her pastor did speak in tongues. He didn't do it in the church, but he did it privately, and she had told me that. So I was like, oh, okay, there's some stuff here, but let me see what she really believes. She went to Word of Life Bible Institute, and they didn't teach that stuff. So I just want to see where she is, and this is the church her family's going to, but this isn't necessarily the one that she picked out. This is where the van is going, So I was talking to her, and I said, yeah, where are you at with, I wasn't even that strong on music at the time. Not as strong as I was. I'm like, where are you on, women pastors or things like that? And she would go, well, obviously I don't agree with it. Our church is a male one now, but the American Baptist Church, that can always switch. You're one pastor away from that. And I said, oh, okay. And so I didn't some people might just say, oh, I just write her off then. She's going to American Baptist. But I didn't do that. I said, no, I want to see where she's at. And of course, we got married, so it worked out. We've been married 4 years now. So, and she's learning from me. And our church, which was part of the IFCA. So Fundamentalist Flying Squirrel, Fundamental. Some people don't know, do you believe the 5 fundamentals of the faith, or are you like a real fundamentalist? I'm a real fundamentalist,
Okay.
So I believe those 5, but
Sure.
I might add a few more things than most people do. Her name's Baptist Bluebird. Or Abby, that's her pen name. But so for her, we were going to a church, and everything about the church was great, and we were part of the IFCA for a while, and but we started letting in some music, and I'm like, this isn't good, but I'm kind of hoping they can kind of see through this. And then we got a new assistant pastor in, and me and him kind of said, hey, where are you at when it comes to music? And he was pretty much right on board with what I was saying. So we actually changed the music to have it more scriptural. We'll still have the Getty stuff, the Sovereign Grace stuff, but we've thankfully taken out all of the Bethel and the Hillsong, and I'm grateful for it. And my wife Abby, she is too, because she was kind of convicted about that. So I don't know. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes your church just changes and it just goes modern. But sometimes
Yeah.
if the Lord still has His hand on that church, it doesn't have to go that route.
Sure. I think fundamentalist Baptists definitely have a reputation, and to hear that even in that world there Bethel has reached into that world,
Yes,
I think is really important to hear because it shows the reach of Bethel. Bethel Church in Reading used to be Assemblies of God. Then they went independent, and now they're part of like the NAR, and they're part of that sort of like hyper charismatic, non-denominational evangelical world. But their music has literally infected every church denomination because like Lutherans are not immune to this. And to hear you talk about this, even fundamental Baptists who have like this reputation of being sorry, but like the kind of a reputation of being like really staunch on everything to the point where they're almost like too staunch. And it's kind of like, dude, maybe you guys should just like relax a little bit. And so like to hear that like even in that world there's churches that are singing this. I'm not glad to hear this by any means, but I think that it's important to just think about that for a second, that like that's how far of a reach Bethel has. And I think that every church, whether you're a Baptist church, Lutheran church, a good Pentecostal church, Methodist, whatever it might be, just man, you got to be careful about the music because yeah, it's where it starts. There
that's
was
right.
somebody, I can't remember who it was. I wish I could remember, but they had an article about how it's always the music that starts.
Yes,
That's always the first place. You start introducing these other groups and these other things that are teaching false things, and that's the slippery slope beginning. You think you can control it, but sadly it sometimes goes beyond that. And I think there's probably churches that could maybe handle it, but I think for the most part it's just like don't even entertain it.
that's right. I got some stories for you if you want to hear them. When I was
Yeah, yeah.
especially in the IFB world, like I said, I'm more in the independent fundamental churches of America, which I think is a fine group of people. And our church kind of left that. We're kind of more going into like the masters now, which is John MacArthur. Like I said, he's had some good stuff to say, but Baptist Blue Jay is not a Calvinist page. It never will be. Um, yeah, I don't see it. I've tried to, kind of like you have
Mm.
before, and then I was reading all the books, and I'd gotten a lot of material, and I said, but I don't know. I was held up actually on limited atonement, to be honest with you. So that was kind of a
Mm.
big thing for me.
Now, real quick, before you continue, so you're not part of the new independent stuff, like Steven Anderson, or is that a different
I think
group?
that's total heresy, and
Okay, okay.
and I really like.
Woo! Good, good. I'm like, wait a minute, we're gonna have to end this real quick.
Oh, and and the thing is too is that I thought maybe it's like uh, I'm gonna take that clip, and maybe we can play that in the beginning. That's total heresy. That'll get some people, but
There you go.
yeah. So with me, I looked into Steven Anderson. I looked into Tommy McMurtry. I've looked into all those guys before. Essentially, where they're at is they're strong on the King James, which is fine because I think the King James is the best version myself. I think there's a lot of others like Henry Morris and J. Vernon McGee, both evangelicals that believed that the King James was the one to use. I think that's
Hmm.
great. And those are both very well respected men. Um,
Sure.
and so there's that. They have the conservative music, great. Um, so they're checking off some of the boxes, but where they really get caught up is kind of on Israel. And
Hmm.
so for me, I've had my debates with them before um, on this, and I don't believe they're unsaved, but I believe that a lot of them are caught up in a delusion, to be honest with you. Um, and Steven Anderson, he was very strict on like child discipline and stuff, and a lot of stuff has come out about him that's just really bad. And you're looking at like, oh, okay, like
Yeah.
your theology affects your behavior. And so for him,
Mm-hmm.
like his theology was very, I would say, kind of rough. And it's unfortunate, but a lot of men did he kind of split the movement a little bit for IFB. You know, he was there
Yeah.
almost with a lot of the stuff, but then one or two issues, he really made it into like a first degree issue, and it kind of split the church. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I know he kind of went. I think it's I think they're the new independent or something. So they're kind of separating themselves now from older ones.
Yeah, so Baptist Blue Jay
But yeah.
denounces that stuff.
Well, there you go. There we go.
That's right. And so for me, when I was strictly independent Baptist, I went to an independent Baptist college. Um, I'll tell you this, I didn't know how many rules there were. So I did a meme on this a little while ago, and I don't know how much traction it gained, but it's kind of that guy, what was his name? You get Rick rolled. Can't remember his full name, but anyway.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
I know
you
exactly
know
what
the
you're talking
rules, and
about.
so do I. Yeah, that's how the meme goes. So I wrote something saying that,
Rick Astley.
yes,
Rick
yes.
Astley.
And so I wrote something saying that I wore sneakers one day. What happened
Mm.
was, um, sometimes I go out and I just don't think. So I just put on my sneakers and went. Everything else looked great. I had the tie on. I had things like that. But I had sneakers on. I didn't really know people yet. So one man, he goes, young man, you know what you're doing? And I said, I have no idea. And he goes, you've got sneakers on, and chapel's about to start. He says, you go back and get those dress shoes. Um, and I said, but if I go back, that means I'm late to chapel and I get demerits. He goes, that's right. But I said, if I just go in there with the sneakers, I'm getting demerits. Yeah, that's right. And I went, oh. Uh, so I ended up getting demerits that day. Uh,
Mm.
and I I made it about almost 2 years in the IFB college world, and I wanted to be a pastor. That's what I wanted to do. And what happened is that my grades were never great. I wasn't that great of a student, to be honest with you. I love studying, reading, things like that. But when it came down to like, oh, you're taking the test, Old Testament Survey 3 was a killer. I looked at it. I said, well, I guess I'm just flunking today. Um, and what I had 49 demerits. They kept shortening how many you could get to get kicked out. But essentially, at the point in time I was at, 50 demerits could get you kicked out. And I'm at 49.
Mm.
So I have a meeting with the pastor. We shake hands. And he goes, well, here's where you're at. I don't want to kick you out. I actually like you. I like your character, who you are, and stuff like that. But he goes, you got 49. Yeah, I get it. And that was because, to be honest with you, some stuff I did wasn't great. I didn't want to do the dishes at one point. I put all the dishes in a trash bag and threw it in the closet. No one saw it, but yeah. I had issues in college.
Hey, you're young. I get it. Yeah.
Yes, old enough to know
Yeah.
better, but still young enough to be foolish. All that stuff kind of snowballed. And so for me, I kind of thought, well, this is my last chance to really kind of do something or to make it, for the Lord. And so I had a lot of run-ins like that, but I made a lot of good friends there. Some kind of went away from the Lord, and I think that's unfortunate. But some of them have stayed with the Lord, and I've tried to keep in contact with them as much as I can. Um, but yeah, that's kind of my whole time in the IFB world. I didn't even last a full 2 years, be honest with you, and
Yeah.
I just couldn't keep up with it. The rules and like, oh, okay, well my tie wasn't straight at one point. Oh, that's a problem. And you always had to wear a collared shirt. So how I got away with that? I like t-shirts. My uniform. I worked at a place called Noodles and Company. You ever been there?
Mm-mm.
Oh, is it delicious? If you go there at some point, get the beef stroganoff. Really good.
All right.
So I
Okay.
worked there for almost 2 years, and when I did, their uniform was t-shirts. Okay, well, if that's the uniform,
Sure.
No collared shirts for me, at least for the days I'm working. So I did a lot of that. So I worked for Noodles and Company. I did school, stuff like that. And yeah, so Baptist Blue Jay for me is like, I love running this page because I can get all the knowledge I have. That school did affect me, right? Like we've talked about music. The first time I ever heard about
Hmm.
conservative music or anything like that was through that school. And I said, that's right.
Gotcha.
That's how it should be. I'm fully on board with that. I'm fully on board with King James Bible. I love that Bible. I think it's the most accurate. I'm not as strict to say the why I don't call myself only. I read other sources, right? So I'm gonna read stuff from
Hmm.
ICR. They use the New King James. I'm gonna read stuff from I'll even read John MacArthur at some points. Sometimes eschatology was a certain thing I felt he was really good at. He doesn't use King James a lot, So that's why I preferred on the page.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I'm still King James, stuff like that. I still love that version, but for me, I don't get too, I guess you'd say, hung up on it. Now I probably lost 50 followers, but uh, you know,
So,
I didn't realize
no,
that. That's on
you're
your
good.
page, hey, and then
No, I mean you made it clear that you're King James preferred, and so I can respect that. I'm not a King James guy at all. I have nothing against it, so I'm not a King James hater by any means. I own a King James and a New King James among many other translations. I like the NASB and the ESV the most, and the what is the NIV 85 or 80 84 I think was not that bad. The newer NIVs got pretty bad, but the NASB, that one to me, I think is the most literal of the more conservative translations that we have. But again, I'm not against the King James by any means. Um, but I am curious. I am curious because I'm not a King James preferred. So, what is your biggest reason for promoting King James? What do you think is the benefit of the King James versus, say, the NASB or the ESV? Or do you think that the New King James is inferior to the King James? What's maybe your best argument for that? Why you like it?
oh, there's a lot on the line here. Well,
No, you don't have. Yeah, I'm like, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you that. So you're like, shoot, I quit.
the pressure's on, I guess. Oh, not because of you, but because of the people listening. The people listening will be
Oh
like, "Hey,
yeah,
I heard that interview. What do you say there about the King James?" Here's what I'm gonna say about the King James. This is why I think it's the best version, because when I look at it,
sure.
I believe that what Erasmus had, he had a limited amount of manuscripts. Now, most people say, "Oh, okay, because he didn't have majority of the manuscripts, um, he just worked with what he had at the time." And Tyndale is
Hmm.
the same. He had limited manuscripts, so he did the best he could with what he had. And I'm actually of the belief that they had the best manuscripts. They had the best autographs. I don't believe they had anything that was inferior. So any version that bases itself off of those manuscripts, I can have respect for, because I say, okay, so I'm not seeing a lot of problems with the missing verses. Um, I'm not seeing a lot of problems with some versions change certain words, and words matter. That's the thing. So when you look at Abraham, right, and it says, I'm trying to think of where it is. It's in Genesis, and it changes from Abraham's seed to Abraham's offspring, and I haven't looked into that fully, but when you change the words, you change the meaning of a lot. So Acts 8, that's a problem I've had for a long time. Acts 8 um, is where the eunuch ends up confessing Christ as a savior, and then he gets baptized. He says, "What's stopping me from being baptized?" Well, if you look at the modern versions, he just gets baptized. He asks the question, and then he gets baptized. And I'm like, wait a minute. So we just took out his confession of faith. Um, that's a problem for me. There's another problem I have. A lot of people say, well, okay, so for the Trinity, we don't need that verse in 1 John 5, because that verse, it explains the Trinity, right? And I think it does the best job out of any of the other verses I've seen. But most people say, well, we don't need it because we have all these other ones. I and the Father are one. And so, but I'm like, yeah, I know, but wouldn't it be so much better doctrinally if we had that verse in there? We could explain the Trinity even better. That's the clearest I've seen, 1 John 5:17. And I know people say, well, the older manuscripts didn't have it. It's a confusing subject, really, because they say, well, these were newer manuscripts, but they're dated older. Sometimes I talk to people about this and they go, okay, you're losing me. And I get that. So for me, we found all these manuscripts at a time where there was a lot of confusion. 1800s, 1900s, you're looking at, sometimes when we talked about charismaticism, we talked about all the stuff getting led into the church. A lot of stuff was happening during that time. And so I'm looking at when all these manuscripts were found. I think where it's from, Alexandria, okay, they could have found it at a better place. Let's face it. You find anything from Egypt, I'd probably just send it back, be honest with you. But my Blue Jay page has made the point, not as much on the source where it was found, Alexandria, stuff like that, but we can get better doctrine. We can have it better if we use the King James Version. New King James, I've never made that much of an issue. The New King James does have some areas that I think cause confusion. Are saved, are being saved in 1 Corinthians. There's a few things like that where I go and I look at it and I say, okay, I think it's more clear in the King James. And so New King James, if I see someone reading it, I don't think, well, I that's a heresy or anything like that. I look at it and say, well, okay, that's a fine translation, but I think we have it better in the King James. I think the wording's better. I think the manuscripts were better. Like I said, from Tyndale, Erasmus, I think a lot of that just kind of lined up. I think most people get it wrong because they say, well, I'm using the 1611 King James, and they go hard on that. Well, there was a rendition of it. So in 1776, we can edit the date later if I was wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's it. It's called Blarney's Rendition.
Okay, I don't know if I've heard this one.
Yeah,
so I mean, it sounds somewhat familiar, but I'm not recalling it. So go ahead and explain.
Yeah, so there's about 80 different changes from those two versions, and I don't see anything wrong with that. And they changed the word structure of it. So if you look at a 1611 Bible, which I was at an IFB church, and I actually looked at a 1611, and I said, boy, this looks different than the regular King James I have on my shelf. And so I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this is really like ye old English. And so the version we actually have King James in, the date is actually 1776, Blarney's rendition. And they just, I think, made it more clear. And most IFB don't really have a problem with that update. That's like the last update that they'll accept, which is fine. I think that's the best one. That's the one I use. I realize 1611 is where we get that from, and so I followed that line of manuscripts. That's basically what I'm trying to say when Baptist Blue Jays got his memes and stuff like that, is that I'm following those line of manuscripts, and I think those are the best ones. And the other ones, although like NASB versions like that, me and my wife, we got an NASB when we got married. That was the version that the pastor gave us. I've read it plenty of times. Actually, my pastor preaches from it. Like I said, I really don't get hung up on it, and I'm fine with it, but NASB, I realize where there's some issues. The brackets that are there, I say, I don't think they should be there. I don't think we need to question that those verses should be in there. And some people, that's why they say, oh, well, New King James, they say, look at all the footnotes there and stuff like that. The footnotes aren't inspired, so the New King James, I just look at the text itself, and the footnotes might help every now and then, but just like anything, you have to check it by the real source, God's word. That's just men talking, at that point.
Sure.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe it's a little all over the place, but that's the best I got for King James,
No, I mean, I can respect that. I've heard these arguments before, and I think they're interesting, and I think that there is a caricature of those who prefer King James sometimes, and I think where you land is much healthier than a lot of the King James only people. Because here's the thing, like what you just said, I'm like, okay, I can respect that. I don't agree with everything you're saying there, but some of the logic there is like, okay, I could follow along and see why you would land in that position. The King James only people would then say, and if you're reading from the NASB, then you're reading from the devil's translations. Like, hold up. There's only a handful of spots that there's even a difference, and we have reasons for it. And and like this isn't like a totally different Bible or anything.
Right.
And so I think, but I think that there can be some character there that you're. If you prefer the King James, that you think all the other translations are heresy or wrong, and it's like, well, you clearly said that you don't. So this is 1 John chapter 5 verses 7 and 8, and this is in the King James Bible. For there are three that bear record in heaven: the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, and these three are one. And there are three that bear witness in earth: the Spirit and water and the blood, and these three agree in one. Okay, so that is the King James Bible. Here's the NASB 95. This is the translation that I have.
Yes.
There are three that testify: the Spirit and the water and the blood, and the three are in agreement. So the NASB removes the part that says that there are three that bear record in heaven: the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost. Now, I agree with you that this is a beautifully worded Trinitarian passage, right? This is essentially saying, look, the Trinity is in the Bible explicitly, right? And it's the thing is, the Trinity's in the Bible explicitly in a lot of places. So we don't need this verse for the Trinity to be valid. This is not the only verse. And if it was, that would be an issue. Thankfully, this is not the only Trinitarian passage of Scripture. But this is like a very clear passage in the King James about the Trinity, almost to the point where it's like maybe too clean. What's interesting, though, is that Martin Luther did his own translation of the Bible in the early 1600s.
That's right.
And so he translated. Now he's brilliant, probably more brilliant than like anybody alive today, right? He could read it. He could read Greek. He could read Hebrew, and so he went from the original languages into German. And so he translates the Bible into the common tongue of Germany, right? Now, what's interesting is he essentially had the same resources that Erasmus does. So he's pulling from the same sources.
Yes.
What's really interesting is that Luther did not include this. So this is called sometimes the comma Johanneum, I believe is the like technical term for this introduction, or first part of this verse. And Luther did not include it in his Greek version of, or is a German version of the Bible. And the reason for it is even though he's using the exact same sources that Erasmus is, he didn't think that it was in the original text. And he expressed a lot of skepticism for it because it was different from the other texts of John. It seemed too clean. And there's actually a tradition behind the first part of it that it was actually added to the manuscripts to fight Arianism, a Trinitarian heresy. And so I say all this, this isn't like a slam dunk on anything you said, because maybe, maybe Luther got it wrong, right? Like that's possible, I
Yeah.
suppose. But what I do think is interesting is that when you start to get into textual criticism and manuscripts and all of that, it's never simple. Like it's because again, Luther and Erasmus are using the same sources, because all those later texts that were found, the Alexandrian that you were talking about, that are older, like they're dated much older,
Mhm.
right? But they are found later. Martin Luther didn't have those. Erasmus didn't have those. And so they're both working with generally what is there at their time. And yet there's actually disagreement among theologians, scholars about what is actually being said in these manuscripts. And so I think, again, it shows that it's never like a super clean thing when we're getting into the topic of translations. And so for me, I always land on this whenever we start talking about translations, is that we are not talking about the original sources. We are talking about a translation that goes from one language to another. Now, I believe it's the word of God. I believe that we can read with confidence that we are reading what God wants us to read. And I believe that the Bible is the inerrant word of God. So like don't think I'm not saying that, because I am 100% saying that.
Yes.
But we are not reading the Greek. We're not reading the Hebrew or the Aramaic, right? Now we can, if you want to learn Greek and Hebrew, you can read it in the original languages. But when we open up our Bible, whether it's the King James or the NASB or the ESV or anything, we are reading a translation of the text. And I think that God preserves his word. And I think what's interesting is like the majority of the words that are chosen, the majority of the translations share so much in common,
Oh yeah.
right? Like the general story is the same, right? The general passages are the same. There's just words that are chosen differently by different translators, because that's how it always works when you translate something. So like, anytime you go from one language to another, it's never one to one. There's always that like, well, this word could mean this, or, you know, it's like some languages have multiple words for the same thing. Some words use one word for two things. Like aloha means goodbye and hello in Hawaiian, right?
Yep.
But like, so if that was in the Bible, we would be like, was he saying goodbye or hello? And that's where like context comes into play and everything. And so, anyways, all that to say is like, I can respect your position. Like, I think you made a good, compelling argument, at least for why you hold to King James preferred. I just think that whenever we get into this conversation, we have to be charitable and careful that, we're talking about sources that are going from one language to another.
Yeah, I'm no genius on this, that's
And
for sure. I'm a layman.
oh, well, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, me too. I'm not a pastor or anything like that. I've just spent a lot of time nerding out over theology and history. I do have a degree in history, but not in biblical
Oh, no.
history. It's all fun stuff. I did want to address and bring up something else you mentioned. You mentioned eschatology. You mentioned dispensationalism, and
Yes.
I'm gonna be 100% honest here, okay? I am not a dispensationalist, and I have made memes dunking on
I've
dispensationalists,
seen them.
and I've probably could have been more charitable, and I, but I to me it's I have strong opinions about dispensationalism, but I would love to hear and here's the thing. I do believe that dispensationalists are my brothers in Christ. Like, I don't think it's a salvation
Oh, of
issue.
course.
It's an interpretation issue, right? And so, but I did want to hear some of your thoughts, and also your perspective on dispensationalism, why you're a dispensationalist, and how you present it, what you think the benefits are.
So the terrible answer would say because it's biblical, and then I just leave it at that. I won't do that. I will try to make the best argument I can for it. So
I just took a I just took a drink of water when you said that, and I literally almost did a spit take.
that's the funny side of me.
Because I was like, I appreciate that. No, yes, you could just You could just say, because it's biblical and mic drop. And then I would spend the next 20 minutes after you left explaining why it wasn't.
Yeah,
But
and I would have a stern
no,
face,
yeah,
pretty much just going like this and saying, "Oh, okay, this is where I hold the line." And it's like, "Oh, all right, well,
no, no. Okay, so obviously you believe it's
oh yeah,
biblical. That's, but yeah, you could maybe elaborate more on how you. I guess a big thing is how do you view it, because there is a lot of character about it as well. Sometimes it's just reduced to Left Behind, right?
oh, yeah, that is a problem. A lot of people read those books, and I think they were
I mean, I did. I read them in the
Oh
'90s.
yeah, and I think they were fine for what they were. I think people have to realize that they're fiction, that there is truth in them, I believe, but that's not the source. That's not what we should go to. And it's like, yeah, I got all my eschatology from Left Behind. I'd be like, oh, brother, you need some work. Uh, so for me, I have looked into like that was kind of the point of the page, right? I'm like, oh, okay, like, where do I kind of even stand out? Like, I don't know if there's many dispensationalist zoo pages. Maybe I should kind of throw my hat in the ring there and see what happens. All right. For me, I look at it, and my assistant pastor asked me, I need to know what dispensationalism is. He goes, I believe it, but I want to know what your take is on it. And I told him this. I said, listen, there are I can't tell you the distinct 7 dispensations, right? I know there's law. I know there's 7 different ways in like how God worked. What I can tell you is this: I know that for a time God was working through Israel, right? And we can see that. And God's promises for them, I believe, are irrevocable promises. And that's one of the differences I have with a lot of zoo pages. So people will bring up to me all the time. They'll say, "But look how unfaithful Israel is. Look how, unfortunately, they had certain things going on, certain events that I would say are totally wicked." But I'm not saying that those guys are the ones that inherit the promise. The wicked ones, God's going to cast them aside. I'm saying that the remnant, the ones God is going to faithfully use, that are talked about in correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremiah 29, Jeremiah 30, the Abrahamic covenant, all these different covenants that hold.
Okay,
And
yeah.
so I'm looking at all these and I'm saying, okay, Israel's unfaithful now, right? And we're in the church age. So the church age, there's certain things for us as well. Um, and obviously, Israel is, I don't believe, really being used of God right now, not in the way God intends. So there's going to be a remnant in the future that Revelation talks about that is the 144,000, right? Those guys are sealed. They are protected by God. They are Jewish people. This is not talking about the church. And those men are going to go out and they're going to give the gospel to the whole world. You see, God wants to give the gospel to everybody. And he uses certain people to do that. For a while, it was Israel. And he had a promise to them, he gave them land. And then now it's the church age. And we see that at Pentecost, God greatly used the church. 3,000 people are added. And then you go at the end and you see, hey, wait a minute. Israel's being used again. God's promises are being fulfilled through them. And I'm not, and I guess dispensationalism says, hey, wait a minute, this is Israel, this is the church. And there's a clear distinction here. Israel, and then God uses the church, which was the great mystery. And then after that, God uses Israel again. And I know this is controversial, and there's a lot of people that don't like this, but the church is taken out. The church is taken out in Revelation 3. And I think that's pretty clear. And so for me, we're not under God's wrath, right? So Israel's protected during that time, and they will go through that time. But the church is taken out because during the 7-year period, some people disagree, but I believe the whole 7 years is God's wrath amongst mankind. And it's kind of a purging, too, till we get to the what eventually is the premillennial. kingdom, which is talked about in Revelation 20, Revelation 20, 21.
Yeah, 20.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Revelation 20. I was right the first time. and so
There you go.
so for me, I'm looking at all this, right? And it's the same thing over and over again. And there's brothers that disagree, like 1689 particular possum. I want to give him a shout out too, because this has kind of been a disagreement between me and him.
He's a cool dude.
He is a cool dude. Yeah, yeah, I like him a lot. And he was kind of he kind of says, hey, this is where I was, and I'm like, well, I'm still there. I still believe a lot of stuff you did. And we see it differently. And so I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at Revelation, and I'm saying, oh, okay, God still has a plan for Israel, and it's not all of Israel. Not all of Israel is gonna follow God faithfully. He's gonna judge. He's gonna purge some out. Not everyone is getting a free pass. But I think for Israel, I say, yeah, no, they're still God's chosen people. I believe the land is still theirs. I think the whole movement of like Palestine and all of that, I think we're getting to a day and age where people this is problematic. I think we're getting to a day and age where people are kind of turning on Israel through falsehoods like the J.D. Hall, Tucker Carlson. I've talked about that a little bit on the Blue Jay page. And he's a fine man, J.D. Hall. I've seen some of his stuff, and I agree with him on some things. He's kind of the one that got me to think about a lot of what we talked about earlier, the modern church and the issues there. But I think he's totally wrong on this. And I think that when the Antichrist comes, he's going to have a lot of people that will go after Israel. Ezekiel 37 and 38, I'm not even sure where to place that. Like I said, I'm not a theologian. I hope it comes after the rapture. I'm going to be honest with you. I see what's going on there, and I go, yikes. Nope, don't want any part in that war. The kings of the north, right, that the Bible talks about, you have Russia, and then Russia right now has, they're taking over parts of the Middle East, right, and they want to kind of join in with Iran. Well, who are they going against, all these different people? Well, yeah, they're going against Israel, and Israel doesn't have much land. Why would you go against them? Unless it's a little bit more of a spiritual battle and not really a physical one. And I'm looking at all this stuff, and I'm looking at the news, and we don't want to just interpret the Bible by what we see in the news, right? This is all the Ezekiel war. I'm looking at that, and I'm saying, oh, okay, can it be applied to today? I believe so. I believe that there are certain things in motion now that in a few years' time, we could be talking about something very serious. The kings of the north coming down, trying to go after Israel. I think God's going to preserve them, though, So I just see the plan a little bit differently than some of the Zoo pages, And some people are saying, especially the radical ones, that it's a first degree, the theological triage. Some people put that
like a top tier.
Tier. Some people put that right on the top tier.
Yeah.
I'm not there, but I'm not third tier either. I'm right, I'm in the middle, but I lean more towards like, no, this really is important. If a church isn't, I even think in second tier, if a church disagrees with you on this issue, you're probably not likely to go to this church. But when I see stuff like, especially online, and what's coming about, and I go, ooh, this is making my stomach turn a little bit. This is very problematic. 50 years ago, you wouldn't have seen this stuff. Nowadays, we're seeing more in America, even animosity. And what's going to happen, I believe, and this is just me, this ain't Bible, this is just me speculating a little bit.
Sure.
If America turns their back on Israel, what's going to happen is the Israeli people, and there's a lot of people in New York City right now that are Jewish people. There's a lot in Hollywood that are Jews as well. So there are many popular actors, actresses that are Jewish. But if we turn against a lot of these people, they're going to want to find somewhere else to go. Well, guess what? They're going to go back to their homeland. And God said that the people of Israel, they're going to come back to that land. I believe fully. And so what's going to happen is it's going to be a mass kind of scattering, like what happened in World War II. Before Israel was a nation, they were kind of scattered
Hmm.
all over the world, and then they kind of come back, right? So I believe that this is God's plan. I don't believe that this is I'm not going charismatic, but I do believe that this is a miracle of God that they were put back as a nation. I can't explain it any other way. And I do believe God is still working. Um, it's unfortunate where they're at now, but that doesn't dictate where they're going to be in the future and what the Bible tells me they're going to be in the future.
I appreciate you telling me, sharing all that. So, I guess the big disagreement that I have is, we can debate rapture and all that, and that's a fun topic. But to be honest with you, rapture theology really just adds an extra element of the historic premillennial view. So, I plan to do a little series on eschatology at some point, and there are three main views of the millennial kingdom in Revelation 20, and that is, um, premillennial, which is that Christ will return before the millennial kingdom; amillennial, which believes that the millennial kingdom is not a physical kingdom or like an actual kingdom that is like here on earth, but rather it is the church age. So we are currently in the reign of Christ right now, and that things could get better at some point. It may just be that Christ is reigning right now. And then there's a view called postmillennialism, and that is that at some point in the future there will be a period of time, whether it's a literal 1,000 year or just a long period of time, where the majority of the earth will be saved and Christ will reign, over a mostly Christian world. So those are the main three ones. Amillennial and postmillennial have a lot in common. Postmillennial is just more optimistic about the future. Amillennial is a little more like, it is what it is, right? And then premillennial is the idea that Christ will actually return before the kingdom. And all three have historic Christians who have defended these views. Um, Postmillennial actually is a little bit newer than premillennial. I used to be postmillennial, and then I started looking into it more and realizing that premillennial is actually a little bit older, and amillennial is also really old as well. And so I'm an amillennialist now. I wouldn't be opposed to if postmillennial turns out to be true, because that's, like I said, that's kind of a nice optimistic future. Premillennial could be true. To me, this is not a big issue, and again, rapture theology is just adding one more aspect to premillennial. So, um, there's really kind of that fourth one, because historic premillennial views are different from dispensational premillennial, because dispensationals add the rapture in there. But all that to say, I just wanted to give a little recap of what those views are, and like I said, I'm an amillennialist. So those are the big views. Again, I'm not a dispensationalist. I'm an amillennialist as far as when we're talking about the kingdom. But I think one of the big things about dispensationalism, and it's the thing that you were kind of talking about here, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because when we talk about the church and Israel being different, where I struggle with dispensationalism, is why I've kind of made some posts about it, is this idea that if God still has a plan for Israel, and if it's distinct from the church, then are we talking purely ethnic? Like, are we talking purely those who can trace their heritage back to the Old Testament patriarchs? Are we talking about people who self-identify as being of Jewish heritage? Or are we talking about people who practice Judaism today? Are we talking about people who are living in the land of Israel? Because here's the thing, those are all different groups. So there are people who practice Judaism who have zero heritage tracing back to Israel that they actually know of, right? They just maybe converted to Judaism. There are people who are living in Israel that are not Jewish. They are simply, just living there. There's atheists, Christians, Muslims, all different kinds of people who are living in the land, and they may have the ethnic aspect of it, but they're not Jewish. And so all these different groups of people could be quote unquote called Israel or Jewish. And so I like that you did say Israel, not Jewish, because today modern
Yes.
Judaism is really rabbinical Talmudic religion. It's not at all like the Old Testament
Right.
religion that was the follower of Yahweh, the true God, right? The Hebrews. Like modern Jews are not the same as the ancient Hebrews by any means, because they've added so much with the Talmud and with the rabbis, and they don't do a lot of the things. They'll follow like the laws and some of the things, but they're not doing sacrifices. They're really not
Yeah.
practicing Jews as far as the Torah commands them to be, right? And so then that raises another question of what do we even mean when we say that God has a plan for Israel still? Are we, because again, are we talking about the land? Are we talking about Jews? Because if we're talking about Jews, I would argue that the modern day Jews are not at all like the Old Testament Jews. And so I don't see how God would work in them, because they're practicing entirely different religion. When we use the term Israel, we're talking about God's people here. And I think that is a much healthier way than saying Jewish or, ethnic things. We're saying Israel has always been God's chosen people. But my pushback to dispensationalism is, but who are God's people now? God's people are Christians. So I don't
Oh,
believe in
sure.
like the quote unquote like replacement theology. I don't believe in that, because I don't think that the church replaces Israel. I just think that the church is Israel. So it's not that they're replaced, it's that the true followers of Yahweh, the true followers of the one true God, have always been Israel. And so the church today follows God. So the church is Israel in that sense of we are the followers of God. So that's how I would interpret those passages about Israel, is that we are the ones, the church is the ones who receive the blessings and the fulfillments and what God has promised to Israel. Well, that's the church. The church is a fulfillment of that. The church receives these blessings, and Christ is head of the church. And I just have an issue with the idea that there's going to be a second group of people outside of Christ that God will use. And so, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, who do you think is actually Israel in the that God will use in the future, and how is he using them apart from Christ, or will they come to Christ? And then I guess if they do come to Christ, then how is that then distinct from the church?
That look at Abraham, right? And you see that Hebrews 11, I believe it is, where it says that his faith was accounted to him righteousness. So we look at Abraham, right? And he was faithful for the most part, just like us all, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I look at Abraham, I look at Jacob, I look at um, who God's using to establish
Yeah.
this nation, right? And I'm seeing the Hall of Hebrews 11, the Hall of Faith is what they call it. I look at guys like that and I say, okay, so one thing to make clear about Baptist Blue Jay, where I stand, things like that, God works for different people through different dispensations, right? But it's one gospel. It's not, well, there's a gospel of works here, and then there's a gospel
Mm-hmm.
of um, faith alone here. It's consistent all the way through. The same way Abraham saved, the same way I'm saved today. I fully believe that. Uh, we both had faith. So for me, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, so
Yeah, I
Israel,
agree.
especially during that time, I'm looking at that saying, okay, they had the same faith that I do today, but the only difference really is, of course, God allowed them, especially with the 12 tribes, and we look through Joshua and stuff like that. God allowed them a certain amount of land. Now we're asking, who are the Jews today, the rightful ones, the ones that should own the land? God has one plan, but he can use two different people to fulfill that plan. And I don't see an issue with that. So what God did was he did give them land. He gave it through Joshua. We can see the dispersion of land. It's not the most interesting chapters in the Bible, you know. I will say that much. But it's there for a reason, right? Everything in the Bible is there
Sure.
for a reason. So I'm looking at all this and I'm saying, okay, so the Jewish people are the ones God is using then. And then the great mystery to be revealed is the church. And the church is, we believe the same way they did, but now God can use us because we have the gospel. So it's going to switch back, is what we believe. So that the Jews, the rightful Jews, the ones that, it's not the people that just went into the religion and they accept the Talmud and all this stuff. Usually when people say that to me, I just kind of go, Baptist Blue Jay is going to kind of scroll by, you know. Plus, I don't want to fight and address every issue that people have, and some won't even listen. So, you know, I love my followers, but some don't listen.
Sure.
And so I tell them this, and I say, listen, I said, God's plan is this. He has the Jewish people, then he has the church, and then he goes back to the Jews again. And the Jews are the ones that were the descendants of, well, Abraham was many nations, but the descendants of Jacob. We'll go back to him. We'll say the descendants of Jacob are the one, and it's not just the people that said, well, I'm Jewish now. I accept the religion and everything it comes with. They might be honored in that way in the system they have now, but I think that's going to entirely switch over eventually, and it's going to be those ethnic Jews.
So, what is that going to look like? Will it be apart from Christ?
No, it won't be apart from Christ. See, just like the faith that Abraham had, just like the
Okay.
faith that the church had, the Jews are going to accept that faith again. That's the thing. The remnant, the ethnic Jews are going to accept Christ for who he is, what they should have done during the time of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They rejected him, and that's unfortunate, and I understand that. But there's coming a time where they won't. And it's not going to be all of them, but it's going to be some of them. And God's going to use those people like the 144,000 and those of that Jewish line, and he's going to send them out, and the gospel is going to be given during that time. See, the tribulation, most people think, well, this is really a dire time. It is. It is a time, they call it Jacob's trouble. It is a time of like God's wrath, but God's still going to get the message out to people. I'm not sure about the people that have heard it before that are still in that time. I can't really see anything in the Bible that says like the ones that heard it before, you probably heard, going into the tribulation will not accept it. I'm not 100% on that, but I will say that that nation will be used as a light for Christ that they should have been before. That's the thing. And when I see that, and you see the line of thinking, and I go, yes, that's what the Bible always points to Christ, right? And it's not saying that all these Jewish people that you see today that are hosting these parades and all this stuff, I'm not even looking to that. I'm looking toward, okay, what's God going to do in the future through these people? God's using the church now, and he's using it in a powerful way. But what happens when that switches over? And which I believe is going to happen. And I want to explain it in a way because some dispensationalists have explained that, well, it was a gospel of works, and then it was a gospel of faith, Paul's gospel, and then it goes back to a gospel of works. No, I don't believe that. Faith all the way through. I think I described it to one person as this. I believe I try to simplify dispensationalism. I won't call myself a leaky dispensationalist like John MacArthur, but I'm really trying to simplify it. I don't like overcomplicated things. That's when people start to lose me. I say, oh, okay, God has one plan. He has two different people that are going to put that plan forth in separate times. And I'm fine with that. some people get angry about it. But I just look and I say, no, I believe that's what Scripture is showing. I can see why other people. I want to dispel one thing too. Some people say, well, you just believe what Darby and Schofield and all these others believe, and I'm saying, no, this is what.
I've said that.
Right. Uh-oh. I didn't mean to call you out. Whoops.
No, you're fine. Go for it.
But I'm looking at these guys, and I would say just like, they're a good. They'll help me spiritually become healthy as like a supplement. But we have to go to the Word, and that's what we have to look and see. Okay, is this actually in here? And I believe it is. I believe these guys really had it. Some people say before that, there was no dispensationalism. I don't know about that necessarily, and it doesn't mean that it was wrong just because no one thought of it before. But you know what? I'm just gonna say it. If Paul taught it, that's as old as it can get for me. And I believe he did.
Sure.
Who's dispensationalist? Oh, I believe Paul is. Uh-oh.
Yeah. So
I can already hear the riots.
yeah. So I guess the big thing, like I appreciate you saying that you're saved the same way that Abraham
That's
is,
right.
because that's what I believe, right? I don't believe that there was like this gospel of works, and now with Christ it's now a gospel of grace. Like, God has always worked through grace. God has always saved people by faith, right? Abraham believes the promise and has counted him as righteousness.
That's right.
So I appreciate you saying that. My question, though, is that if there is the old way, so God was working through ethnic Israel, so to
Yeah.
speak, and that was the Jews, and that is our Old Testament period from the patriarchs to the silent period and then to Christ, right? And then Christ ascends into heaven, gives the Great Commission, Pentecost, the Holy Spirit comes down, and we enter into the church age. I believe dispensationalists start the church age at Pentecost or the Ascension. I think one of those is kind of the official dispensation of the church age.
Sure.
I think some may go back to Christ, but I think a lot of them will put it after Christ's death and resurrection.
Well, mid-Acts too.
Which I would too if I was a dispensationalist.
Yeah.
Then there's mid-Acts, right? When you say that it's going to go back because there's two peoples, so to speak, where I kind of would pause and have some serious questions here is, so the point of the Old Testament, the point of the Torah, the point of the Bible, the Old Testament, is pointing to Christ. And so Hebrews 11, I love Hebrews 11. Actually, I kind of stopped calling it the Hall of Faith because I think that sometimes we no, it's fine because it is the Hall of Faith. Like, that's totally what it is, right? But I personally have stopped calling it that because I think sometimes we can miss what's actually going on, right? If we just view it as this, like, oh, here's this list of people who did amazing things, and here's like Hall of Famers, like sports people, right? It's like Barry Bonds hit a bunch of home runs. He's great. We remember him for this. Babe Ruth, right? But that's not really the point of Hebrews 11. Because what Hebrews 11 is actually telling us is they believed in promises they didn't fully see. So Abraham believes before he has a child. Abraham believes in the promise, right? So all of these people are seeing things. And it even explicitly talks about how, like, some prospered, some died, before the promise was fulfilled. And Hebrews is all about pointing to Christ. And it's all pointing to that all of this, all the faith that they had was in promises. Then all of those promises are actually ultimately fulfilled in Christ. And then I think Hebrews, I can't remember, I think it's in Hebrews 7. I believe it's in Hebrews 7, refers back to Genesis 14 when Abram receives a blessing from Melchizedek, and then he gives him a tithe, and we get this king priest character, right? Melchizedek. And he's like not there at all before, and then he's not there after. It's like he just sort of appears, and it just says that he's a king and a priest of the Most High God,
Yes.
right? So clearly he's this Melchizedek is a true believer in the true God. And then Hebrews pulls this random dude who's like just this mystery character back in, and it says that Jesus is a priest of the order of Melchizedek, which is pre Levites, right? Because Jesus is actually from the tribe of Judah, if you're going to trace his Jewish heritage, his Hebrew heritage, right? So he can't be a priest because only the Levites could be the priest. And yet Jesus is a priest, but he's from an order that is older. He's from the order of Melchizedek, which is, superior in a way to the Levitical priesthood because it predates the law, predates everything. It's priests, it's people that believed in the Most High God before the organization of the temple system. And it's saying that Jesus is greater than the Levitical priests. Jesus is the greater king. He is the of the superior order is really what it's trying to convey here, right? And so my point with all of this is with dispensationalism, when we start talking about two different groups of people and the church and Israel and all of that, I think we have to ask some serious questions here because Israel starts with Jacob, but it's the promise that is given to Abram. And yet there were followers of the true God before this. And so Christ is from that, it says he's from that order, and Hebrews is all about pointing to the promises. And so Israel itself was only established as a set apart people to be the ark, to carry the true gospel, the true message of God to the peoples of the earth. And its ultimate fulfillment is in Christ. And so to me, again, there is no distinction between the church and Israel because the church is not replacing Israel. It's what Israel is always meant to become. Followers of the true God, followers of Christ. And so Christ comes and he fulfills all of those promises. And so I am part of Israel because I'm part of the church. I am the true Israel. The nation state today is a secular nation state that has nothing to do with ancient Israel whatsoever. And so to me, it may have the same name, but it's a totally different thing. And so when you say that things will go back to the other system or will go back to, Israel, and I like that you said this because at least within your framework, they're not going to be operating outside of Christ. So that's comforting to hear.
That's right.
Because I think, if we're going to talk about because if they're going back to some sort of sacrificial system, I'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But then my question is, how is that any different from the church then? You know what I'm saying? So for me, I would say, praise God. If the rapture is if the rapture is true and the tribulation is true, and Christians are removed from the church, from the world, right? The church, the true Israel is taken from the world. If a bunch of Jewish people recognize that Jesus is the Messiah, to me, that's not God reintroducing the old systems by any means. That would just be preserving the church, which he promises to do. And so it would still be true Israel, but it would also just be the church because they're following Christ. But they would just be ethnically Jewish. Does that make sense? How is that any different from the church? And then also, how do you deal with the idea of Christ being the ultimate fulfillment of everything and of the order of Melchizedek outside of the quote unquote Israel system?
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot to address there. Some dispensationalists would say there were no promises given to the church, unlike Israel. So what I would say to that is that when it comes to Israel, there were certain promises that weren't fully fulfilled, and these were talked about. And some people really should study Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and you study these things out, and you go, okay, so there's something coming to where the Jews will be scattered, and then they'll be brought back to the land. We didn't understand, like I said, what the great mystery was. I believe that salvation, all of that was fulfilled through Christ. One quick thing I'll say is, yeah, Jesus paid it all, and actually some
Yeah.
people might even disagree with that. I've heard preaching that would say differently. But what I'll say to this is that those promises Jesus fulfilled. I'm not making his fulfillment less or anything like that. I believe he fulfilled what he came to do, and it for like we look at that and you say that's the gospel, right? But towards the end, you're looking at that and you're saying, oh, okay, in Revelation, Israel's brought back. It's not the church. There's a distinction here that Israel, like the 12 tribes, I had heard it said by a Presbyterian, well, Jacob and the 12 tribes, and he said, that's the church. And I said, well, that's what the disagreement is. I said, no, that's the start of Israel. That's the start of their nation, and God's using them. Towards the end of the Bible, Revelation, God decides he's going to use them again. The churches, some people say Israel's grafted into the church, those who are saved. And I'd say the opposite. The church, those who are saved, are grafted in to Israel. Eventually there won't be any distinctions like this or anything like that. We'll all be one in Christ. But I just don't see necessarily a difference between. I see that there's a difference between Israel, and I see there's a difference between them and the church. I guess that's kind of the big disagreement, even when I have with zoo people. You know, um, I will throw out a zoo name, Evangelical Eagle, and he challenges me on a lot of stuff that you're talking about now. Some stuff like Melchizedek and things like that I can't say I fully researched, right? I've researched a lot. I've studied a lot of things. So if you don't see clarity in this particular answer, that's probably why. But I will say that, just like I said before, in Revelation, I don't see the church in there at all. I believe in a pre-trib rapture that kind of sets the stage for Israel again. We don't know when that's going to come. That could come any day. We could be talking now, and if my phone goes, it might not be my phone. It might just be me.
we could just
You
cut it
go
right
too,
now,
of
and people
course.
will be like, "Oh no, no, I'm just kidding."
I'm rapture ready. I've already been taken up.
Uh,
But that's
there we
but
go.
that separates, like, oh, okay, church is now gone, and then we have Israel now, and God says, I'm going to use them as a light. And some people get confused because they say, well, what about the temple? That's being rebuilt again, and what about all these things? And it's like, all that stuff was fulfilled in Christ. We don't need the sacrifices anymore. I agree with that. I don't think we need a
Yeah.
third temple. I think when Jesus came, he died, and that was it, and then he rose again. But God is going to use Israel differently, even though the Israeli people now are saying, "Oh, we're gonna bring all this stuff about and bring back the old ways and stuff like that." For me, I'm looking at it saying, "Okay, God's going to use them, but not in the way they're expecting." It's gonna be gospel centered. If I was here to see it, I would give it a thumbs up, but I won't be here to see it. So
All right. Well, I know you got to get going. I appreciate your answer, and we'll continue talking about this, I'm sure. But I just wanted to thank you again for being on the podcast, Baptist Blue Jay, and maybe give us a little, summary of some of the things you'll be talking about. I think you kind of did throughout this episode today, but some of the things that you'll be hitting on as the podcast, what people might expect if they do tune into your podcast. And once again, thanks for being on the Bad Fruit.
yeah, so expect this. Expect me to talk about the same stuff I was talking about on this one. I'm going to be talking about creation science. I'm going to be talking about dispensationalism. Um, I'm going to be hitting end times pretty hard. I know some of you are going to skip that one, but that's okay. We don't have to fully agree. But so hopefully people will tune in. I'm looking forward to it. So I'm going to release my first episode just saying a little bit about who I am. And I kind of talked about that a little bit, my testimony on here, but I'll give you a little bit more on the Baptist Blue Jay podcast. I hope through this that I represented what I believe to be the old school fundamentalism Bob Jones. And that's kind of camp I land in. And I've said that on my Baptist Blue Jay page, but that's what you can expect when you hear my podcast. And I appreciate you having me on. This was
Cool.
great. I think we had A lot of
Yeah.
good discussion. I'm not as angry as what I appear to be online.
Well, if you ever need a Lutheran on your Baptist Blue Jay podcast, I'd be happy to come on sometime. I'm gonna invite myself, but you know,
Then I'll have the hard
you can
questions.
interrogate me.
Yes.
Yeah, you can interrogate me. So we could talk infant baptism, real presence of the Lord's Supper. We can go all out if you want.
Oh, here come all the disagreements. Uh-oh. We didn't get into the weeds, I guess.
All right. Well, once again, thank you, and we will let everybody know when your podcasts drop. And so, if that sounds like something people are interested in, then we'll point them in that direction.
Appreciate it. Great to talk with you.
Well, thank you so much for listening to the Bad Fruit podcast today. As you probably noticed, there were a few things that we do disagree on. I'm not a fundamentalist Baptist, and I don't only read or don't only prefer the King James, and I am certainly not a dispensationalist. But I genuinely enjoyed this conversation with the Baptist Blue Jay, and I look forward to listening to his podcast and seeing where he goes with that, and learning more about his perspective and maybe offering more pushback. Maybe he'll have me as a guest on his podcast and he can grill me about my views. But I think it is good for Christians from different traditions to sit down sometimes and explain what they actually believe, laugh a little bit as we did, disagree honestly, and still recognize one another as brothers in Christ. Now, I do not pretend that my disagreements are insignificant, because obviously they are. He is very passionate about his views, and I have very strong opinions, especially about dispensationalism. But despite our differences, there was a surprising amount of common ground here. We both want churches that take doctrine seriously. We both reject the entertainment-driven model of modern evangelicalism. And we both believe that the origins of what you're singing and the lyrics that you're singing are far more important than the style of the music. If you want to have modern music, that's fine, as long as the theology is good and the source is not completely heretical. I will link to the Baptist Blue Jay Facebook page and his podcast. So if you're interested in finding out more about him, connecting with him, and we mentioned a lot of other pages from the Theological Zoo, and I'll maybe try to tag some of those because it is really cool. Once you discover that it's a thing, it's pretty neat. And so if you're not following those pages, you definitely should. All right, well, thank you once again for listening to my conversation with the Baptist Blue Jay, and we will talk to you next time. God bless.